Episode 1 of Raising Dion Season 2 begins 2 years after the big fight with the Crooked Man. Down at the arcade, Braden Mills walks over to the cashier with a whole wad of tickets. Using his newly acquired powers, he manages to convince her to give him the top prize before walking out. Although Braden is attacked, he uses his powers again, this time to form a monstrous electrical smoke monster to destroy the thug. Yep, the Crooked Man is back and this time he means business. Braden also hitches a ride with a random couple too, whom he brainwashes into traveling across to Atlanta. Why? Well, that's where Dion is. Over in Atlanta, Dion sets to work cleaning up the neighborhood, one group of bullies at a time. That's a problem because Nicole ends up on a video call with Biona, who encourage her to keep Dion's powers under the radar for the time being. After being offered a position on the board, Nicole drives Dion to school after a little chat about his extracurricular activities, of course. She's been tracking his phone and knows he's been slipping out to do some superhero training. At school, a sinkhole has appeared in the field. It's been 3 months and it appears this could be part of a larger issue. For now, the Triangle of Justice, Jonathan, Dion and Esperanza, attend school. However, things take an unfortunate turn when Braden shows up as a new student. After class, Dion arrives at Biona with Nicole. While Dion gets settled in, there's a nice vibe with Tevin, whom Nicole clearly has chemistry with. Only, it turns out he's actually Dion's trainer. She doesn't want to get romantically involved with a powered being, but there's undeniably chemistry here. Another new character is the ever so slightly suspicious David Marsh, who's the VP of Operations. He tries to ask Suzanne out on a date, which doesn't go to plan, but it does pave way for more information about the sinkholes. It turns out several more have cropped up across the globe. But what is their origin? Well, we soon learn that these are the work of Braden and the Crooked Energy, which is itself a sentient organism. That night, Dion heads home but he forgets his phone, having left it at Biona. Believing he can make it there and back again before Nicole realizes, he teleports to the building and finds it on the bench. Unfortunately, he also hears footsteps echoing across the floor. David and Suzanne talk in the hallway, with David mentioning that the sinkhole readings are off the charts. As we cut across to the sinkhole itself, flowers sprout up, leading to strange fluorescent bugs attacking one of the security guards. This seems to be the start of something much larger, and surprisingly a powerless Pat shows up at Biona and warns Suzanne that they're in danger. Episode 2 of Raising Dion Season 2 begins 2 years back with us seeing exactly what happened to Pat following the big fight. He inexplicably returned after the Crooked Energy disappeared. 1 minute he was dead, and the next he's not. With the energy floating away, Pat's wounds healed and he decided to lay low, starting anew in a little town. Until now. He saw the Crooked Man and a new host, Braden, but that's not known to him right now, and showed up to warn Biona. Suzanne is still untrusting though, and decides to do as many tests as possible to prove Pat doesn't have his powers anymore. She ignores Pat's pleas and keeps him in lockup. At school, Braden continues to stare daggers at Dion. Our little hero starts to realize something is untoward, but for now, he remains quiet. Until after class anyway, when he manages to get Dion alone to show him around. The Crooked Man is close to attacking Dion in the hallway, but for some reason, he's unable to take him out. After class, Dion seizes his opportunity to go and investigate the sinkhole. He manages to find those same strange flowers from before, but as they spark to life and begin to reach out, Dion teleports out of there and hurries off with Jonathan. Back home, Kat starts living with Nicole. She encourages her sister to get Tevin's number, knowing there's more going on between them. She even gives her some fashion advice too. Off the back of this, Nicole and Tevin begins to flirt a little after Dion's session. Nicole is told about Pat Ion Confidence and pays him a visit in his cell. Pat reveals the truth about the Crooked Man being out and dangerous, but she too doesn't believe him. When she leaves the room, Nicole urges Suzanne not to let him out or tell Dion what's going on. Although her flustered reaction and urging Dion to leave doesn't exactly help matters. That night, Dion is approached by Braden in his room. Only, it's just a vision of him. Brayden admits that he's got powers too, and with an evil smirk, declares that they're going to be best friends. Episode 3 of Raising Dion Season 2 begins with Dion at school, distracted by Brayden, and how he too has powers. They talk pretty openly about it outside, but Brayden is clearly a bad influence, and even encourages Dion to skip class too. Well, sorta anyway. During class, the pair end up inside Brayden's head. He can make Dion see things, including memories of Brayden's childhood with his parents. His father also had powers, specifically in the form of allowing plants to grow. These dreams soon end with a nightmarish vision of Brayden's mum telling him he's an evil child. As Brayden screams, the pair blast back into class. Meanwhile, a very infected Gary stumbles over to the sinkhole and seems to transform into something far more sinister. At the same time, Nicole and Tevin continue to grow closer together. The pair hang out together, with Kat playing cheerleader for the pair. There's also word on Pat too, with all the tests coming back negative. He definitely doesn't have his powers, but that's a lie. David visits Pat in confidence with a soil sample from the sinkhole. It appears it's still charged with fragments of Pat's DNA. He wants Pat's help with his research, and part of that comes from keeping up the lie and making sure Suzanne is none the wiser. David takes him to the sinkhole next, where Pat gets a feel for what's happening. The crooked man is angry, and very clearly not hiding anymore. The crooked energy realizes Pat is nearby and encourages Brayden to disrupt everything. Specifically, he tells Dion about Pat. A big standoff ensues right by the sinkhole, with Nicole showing up and managing to stop Dion from blasting Pat with his powers. When he finds out about Nicole lying, he's not happy and begins crying. At last, until they head home anyway. Dion soon comes around, revealing what he saw earlier with the flowers and the strange occurrences deep in the sinkhole. While this is going on, Esperanza gets over her initial nerves and sings for the school audition. She nails it too, the second time around anyway. Suzanne rings Nicole and encourages her to show up that night. "I'm not afraid of monsters," she declares proudly just before she falls in the sinkhole. Just like Gary before her, the flowers sprout, and with it, the strange luminous glow we saw before. Only this time, the infected security guard is turned into the Swamp Thing, a monstrous, plant-like creature that tries to attack her. Nicole manages to get out, but so too does this creature, which eventually runs away. Episode 4 of Raising Dion Season 2 begins with Nicole back home, being patched up by Kat. She's been scratched, but Suzanne is confident that it's not deep, so she shouldn't be infected. Suzanne is taking drastic measures at Bio-Na though, deciding to take a team down to destroy and burn whatever is down in the sinkhole. Not only that, these sinkholes across the world seem to be hotspots where the crooked man has attacked, and Suzanne finally sees the direct link between the two. Nicole also lies to Dion too when he asks about the scratch. She claims she just fell over, deciding to try and shield him from the monster problem. She also tells Dion to stay inside for the time being, prompting him to ring Brayden and invite him over. Although to be honest, it's not really explained why he doesn't invite Jonathan or Esperanza over. Anyway, while he waits for the evil kid to show, Dion speaks to Esperanza about her real powers. It's not invisibility after all, it's very clearly her singing. Eyes a beautiful chat, but it's soon interrupted by our Sith child showing up to ruin the day. At the school sinkhole, the team work to destroy the hole. For David though, he's unhappy about this and urges Suzanne to stop and research what's happening. Suzanne suggests he be suspended, but in return, David reveals the coupler is looking to replace her, which throws Suzanne off her game. As they talk, David opens up and breaks the news that the sinkhole actually has crooked man energy inside. At Bio-Na, Janelle loses control of her powers, leading to armed security with guns to show up. Things are blown completely out of proportion, and it's Nicole who manages to step in and calm Janelle down. She's definitely helping the teen, and it appears she has a knack of helping the powered. In fact, she even sets up a safe space for Janelle to practice using her powers. While Tevin teaches Janelle, Nicole speaks to the girl's mother who admits that everything started when a big explosion took place in the science lab. This is what started their road into become a powered being. Nicole next heads off to speak to Pat in confidence. He admits that the crooked man uses its energy to feed on hatred and fear. But it seems like the sinkhole underground, on the site of the Civil War, could well be helping to channel its powers and make it grow stronger. Pat also deduces that Dion could be the key to curing this, given he's pure good. However, Nicole's arm begins to flare up, and as she removes her bandage, it's clear to see that the scratch is most certainly infected. Brayden is obviously a bad influence and encourages Dion to break the rules. When Dion mentions what happened with his father, Brayden begins to doubt his own ties with this creature. However, the hatred is too strong, and Brayden soon makes Dion use his powers against a couple of bullies, with Brayden finishing it off by using his mind control to let the pair fight each other. Brayden encourages Dion to do what he wants and manages to cause a barking dog to double over and become docile. And now Dion realizes the kid is bad news. Finally, while Kat picks Dion up and takes him home, at Biona Nicole is taken into quarantine. Elsewhere, Brayden is influenced by the crooked man, who encourages him to do the right thing and claims he has no friends other than him, feeding off the boy's energy. As the episode closes out, those strange luminescent critters from the sinkhole begin to swarm and grow across town, infecting numerous different. Episode 5 of Raising Dion Season 2 begins with Pat being woken up in the middle of the night. The scientists are expecting him in the lab. As Pat starts getting up, he sees Brayden in front of him. Only, it's actually an image of Brayden and, by extension, the crooked man. When Pat realizes the young boy is infected with the energy, he encourages him not to let it control him. Brayden, though, is too angry and full of hatred to listen and demands he keep quiet. And just like that, he disappears from view. In the lab, Pat reveals that he intends to use Dion's DNA to try and formulate a cure. Given Pat's echoed powers seem to have a connection to Nicole's infection, it's all up to him to try and save the day. Thanks to Kat's interjection, she helps nudge him in the right direction. Nicole and Pat are interrupted by one of the swamp creatures, which is captured and brought in for examination. Only, it's clearly not the same one that initially attacked her. Biona soon realize they're dealing with more than one monster. When Suzanne finds out, she sets up a quarantine. Things aren't looking good as Pat comes out, despairing and talking to Nicole about how hopeless all of this is. He's not sure they'll be able to fix up the infection and worries that he needs more time to perfect the formula. When Janelle hears this, though, she suddenly uses her powers to head into the lab and isolate the different components of the mixture. It seems to do the trick, and after separating the DNA strand, everyone realizes that Janelle's powers aren't completely destructive. Back at the lab, Pat's serum works until it doesn't. The man they tested on unfortunately loses consciousness before he can turn back completely and dies. I guess it's back to the drawing board? Meanwhile, Dion is taken out to the quiet tranquility of the woods with Aunt Kat and Tevin. However, Brayden happens to be across the pond watching them from afar, while Tevin and Dion play tag. Esperanza soon rings, though, admitting she's having trouble with her performance and needs some words of encouragement. Of course, Dion says just the right thing to help. Brayden gets inside Tevin's head and encourages him to kill Dion. When Tevin catches up with Dion again, he starts to use his powers. Thankfully, Tevin manages to see through the mind control long enough to encourage Dion to run. Unfortunately, a whole swarm of birds circle around Dion, knocking him down as Brayden catches up. Episode 6 of Raising Dion begins in the woods with Brayden exerting his will over Dion. However, Dion uses his powers to teleport inside Brayden's mind. There, he finds a young Brayden trapped underneath the porch, which seems to explain our evil Brayden's current anger. After letting the kid out, it seems to change Brayden completely. Dion is thrown out of his mind, Brayden runs away, while Tevin and Dion attempt to chase him. Only, the boy is too quick and manages to slip away in a car. Meanwhile, Suzanne arrives with bad news. In less than 2 days, Nicole will be completely transformed. Suzanne has a risky solution, which comes from injecting her with tiny doses of the serum in the hopes of slowing the rate of infection and prevent more spores from being made. So how much more time would she have? Give or take, Suzanne estimates about 36 hours. At Bayona, Dion shows up and reveals what's happened with Brayden. Suzanne intends to bring in a SWAT team to arrest the boy, although Dion is convinced that he's not outright evil, especially given what he's seen inside Brayden's memory palace. Back home, Nicole speaks to Kat about her situation. She urges Nicole to use Dion's healing powers to try and cure her, but she refuses, believing he's not strong enough to do this. Instead, Nicole has decided to give him the perfect day, deciding to be there for Dion during his big school play and try to keep everything normal. Meanwhile, the SWAT team show to try and find Brayden. He's not in the house though, and in fact he's actually out by the shed, hiding. The crooked energy swirls around him, telling Brayden he needs to use his mind control and hit back, but Brayden refuses. At least to begin with anyway. The energy is much stronger now than it was before, and because of that, the energy infects him and takes Brayden over completely. Dion senses this too, believing the boy has gone completely. Not only that, Nicole's infection starts to get worse, with her struggling to inject the serum and stop the flow of infection. Kat arrives at Bayona in order to help out with the infection. Pat is going to use superpowered gene therapy. Specifically, he's going to create a form of powered DNA to thwart the infection. As they begin researching, it appears that Bayona may actually be able to manufacture their own powered beings, and even change what powers each person has too. During the final day, Nicole and Dion spend time together making pancakes. She also helps Esperanza with her song too, before heading out for an impromptu date with Tevin. He promises to be there for Dion if when she passes away. Given this is Nicole's last day, there's an awful lot of time dedicated to these two chatting about the past. Just before they look set to kiss though, Nicole's infection takes a turn for the worst. At school, Brayden shows up and puts everyone to sleep. Everyone except Dion and Esperanza for some reason. Brayden and Dion immediately start using their powers, with Esperanza manages to wake up Jonathan from his slumber. Thankfully, the latter helps to turn the tide of battle, using a fire extinguisher to throw Brayden off his game. When he tries to mind control Esperanza, she thwarts it by not listening? I dunno, it's not really explained, but the triangle of justice comes out victorious nonetheless. Eventually Dion is taken home by Tevin, where he finds Nicole sick and incredibly weak. Dion's healing powers also fail to work. Meanwhile, things at Bayona take an unfortunate turn for the worst. Pat is taken off the case, left to stew in his cell. Only, he ends up taking the experimental serum for himself and injects his arm that night. In doing so, he begins convulsing and fitting on the floor. Episode 7 of Raising Dion begins with Suzanne and the others racing into the cell to find Pat unconscious on the floor. I say race, they basically slowly jog into the room. When Suzanne notices that Pat has used the serum, froth staining his mouth, he's rushed to surgery. Only, his hand starts to manifest new powers, which could well be a throwback to the crooked energy we saw before. He's in a deep coma, and with his heart rate up and his vital signs all over the shop, things don't look good. Meanwhile, Nicole decides to make her final hours the best she can. Nicole is on the mend, at least a little anyway, and sets to work putting her affairs in order. She wants to make sure everything is in place for Dion to thrive if she does pass away. Part of that comes from talking to Janelle's mum, Simone, asking her to look after him if she passes away. After helping out with Janelle, she's more than happy to do that. With the pair heading to Dion's show that night, they decide to talk later on about this. However, Simone decides to take Janelle back to Chicago. She wants to run away, believing they're not safe anymore. With Nicole passing away and Bayona in disarray, Janelle is shocked that Simone is running away. Janelle kicks off though, and eventually explodes the glass in the car and runs. At the same time, Nicole gives an impassioned video, talking about how great it's been being Dion's mum. With tears stinging her eyes, she struggles to get all the words out. Elsewhere, David ends up in a chat with the board of directors at Biona. He brings up the cellular exchange and how he intends to give superpowers to those who aren't powered. Basically, custom-made superheroes. In order to do that, he wants funding for his own team. All of them reject the offer vehemently, bringing up the dangers this poses, and also what's happened to Pat. As they walk out, David slams his fist on the table in frustration. At the show, Dion ends up backstage, but he's struggling. He clutches his ears in pain, gritting his teeth and calling out as it appears as if he's being controlled. Kat, though, receives a call about Pat, and she's forced to abandon Dion for the time being. While she leaves, Nicole heads backstage to catch up with his son. Brayden happens to be outside and demands he meet on the football field. The final fight is upon us. Episode 8 of Raising Dion starts with a whole army of infected swamp creatures lurking about and following Brayden's lead in the field. As they all stand together, egging him on to fight, Nicole speaks to Dion. Dion eventually opens up about Brayden, and the pair decide to face him together. Just before they do, though, Dion heads off to give Esperanza words of encouragement before her big gig, telling her about Brayden. It's all up to Esperanza to keep everyone inside and entertained, and that comes from her singing her heart out. What happens to Pat? Does he die? At the hospital, the doctors struggle to try and save Pat. It turns out the powered DNA is competing for dominance, and he may well be dying. For David, though, he doesn't care about Pat and instead is more interested in the outcome of the DNA once everything settles down. Basically, David wants to monetize his powers and make a tidy profit. After being refused by the board, he takes drastic measures, and when Pat passes away, he organizes for samples to be taken from his body. Some time passes, and Pat inexplicably awakens again. It turns out he has the power to heal his own body. With electrical powers and a big chip on his shoulder too, he hits out at Suzanne for locking him up and betraying him. Those powers aren't all he has either. Pat also has telekinesis and explosive capabilities, which he puts into good use to escape from Biona. What happens during the final fight? Is Brayden stopped? Outside in the field, Dion and Nicole approach Brayden. The pair are joined by Tevin, who manages to use his force field to hold back the monsters. Suddenly, a brilliant bright light in the sky appears and swirls down to the ground. It's Janelle. Somehow she manages to materialize and dematerialize her own cells and helps to turn the tide of battle. At least a little anyway. Brayden continues to manipulate Dion, throwing him off his game. Given he has the power to read his thoughts, Brayden has his infected hold everyone down. With electric sparks emanating from his fingers, he prepares to hit the killing blow. However, it's Nicole who manages to talk him around. Nicole reveals his past and specifically about Brayden's mother and her love for him. The darkness manages to fade from his eyes. As he steps forward to embrace Nicole, the crooked energy crawls away and into the sinkhole. How is the infection stopped? Recovering from his injuries, Brayden confirms that the crooked energy is en route to create more of the infected. The flowers are the key to the infection here, so the gang deduce that if they could inject the serum into the flower, at the root cause of it all, it should stop the infection. So with all hope lost and everything resting on a precarious knife edge, Dion takes the serum and heads into the sinkhole alone, preparing to inject the flowers. The crooked energy continues to swirl in the air. Dion doesn't let that stop him though, and he injects the flower, which in turn cures everyone from their infection. What happened to the crooked energy? Where is it? Thankfully they managed to do all of his just before Esperanza's big singing number. And as she sings, the gang all gather together after having saved the day. However, the real crooked energy is actually with Pat. David's attempts to persuade him over to his cause and monetize the powered serum fall on deaf ears. The crooked man returns once and for all, with Pat complete with the dark energy once again. Unfortunately, that looks set to be bad news for everyone. How does Raising Dion Season 2 end? We then skip forward 2 days later. Nicole isn't dying after all, negating her whole video message for Dion, and a lot of the drama these past few episodes. Kat remains determined to try and reverse Pat's powers, working with Biona to make that happen. Nicole encourages Dion to use his powers too, letting him grow up a bit, while Pat's whereabouts are still unknown. At least until the post-credit sequence. What happens during the post-credit sequence? Just outside Atlanta, we skip forward in time to find a much older Pat with a whole army ready to follow him. It's hinted that they all have powers too, but that's unclear from the shots we receive. A hero called Mind Mover shows up and decides to stop them. And this appears to be a much older Dion, given the costume looks similar to what he's been sketching. What does this mean for the future? The episode review. Raising Dion bows out with a conclusive chapter, one that uses the oldest trick in the book to say the day, love. Using a monologue of love to save Brayden and thwart the darkness is about as cliched as you can get in this genre. However, it appears the crooked energy has now infected Pat again, and he's back to his old tricks once more. That's a bit of a shame if I'm honest, negating the whole redemptive arc this show was building up toward for much of the season. Likewise, Brayden's ending just sorta ends. It would have been nice to see him touch down in the future flashback alongside Dion, if that is him of course, and show that he's managed to turn his life around. For now though, his fate is left unclear. Some of the subplots have been pretty poor though, especially Esperanza's singing. Sure, this is a nice inclusion, but like I said in last episode's recap, it has absolutely no effect on the main storyline whatsoever. It feels like a missed opportunity not to incorporate this into the mind control Brayden used, explaining how she managed to stop him controlling her, rather than I just didn't listen. This season has been rather contrived, and it's a shame there wasn't more development in the relationship between Nicole and Dion. There have been glimmers here of the pair starting to grow, but mostly it's been thwarted by the tepid romance between Tevin and Nicole. While not as strong as the first, this second season of Raising Dion has been pretty mediocre. Dropping on a Tuesday is an odd choice too. I'm not sure if that was done as a way of trying to rush it out the door before the heavy-hitting series and films over the weekends ahead, but either way, this has not been a season to remember. There's certainly been potential, but it feels untapped in a way. If this is renewed for a third season, hopefully it's much stronger than this follow-up.